Lois Arquette stood next to the hospital bed. This couldn't be real. The form tucked beneath the sheets in this morgue-frigid ICU did not resemble her beautiful young daughter at all. Her head was bandaged, with much of her lush blonde hair shaved away. There was a bit of dried blood on her temple, and her face was grossly swollen, all but hiding the beauty mark her parents had dubbed her misplaced dimple or God's fingerprint. No, this did not seem real. Rather, it was more like a scene from a novel, like one of the best-selling young adult novels Lois herself had penned. The author, born Lois Steinmetz, used the pseudonym Lois Duncan in her successful writing career. Her books featured young heroines in jeopardy. Among her published works are many titles made into Hollywood films, including I Know What You Did Last Summer, Killing Mr. Griffin, and Don't Look Behind You. Lois could not have known, as she stared into the swollen face of her daughter Kaitlyn, that she would never be able to write another work of fiction where a young female protagonist was in peril. Instead, Kaitlyn would be removed from life support, and her determined mother would spend the rest of her life trying to unravel the pieces of the mystery she and her family were forced to now live. The day had begun like any other. It was a Sunday, July 16th, 1989. Kate, the youngest of Lois and Dawn Arquette's 5 children, had stopped by the family home in Albuquerque, New Mexico. She was hiding out from her boyfriend, Dung Nguyen, with whom she shared an apartment. It was actually Kate's place, only her name was on the lease. But she and Dung had been arguing a lot lately, and Kate had just asked him to move out. She gave him until the end of the month. The pair had been dating since her senior year of high school, and independent Kate moved out on her own. She was now 18, a student at the University of New Mexico. She was a driven young woman with plans to become a doctor. She worked part-time at Pier 1 Imports, a home goods retailer, and she saw her family often. So July 16, 1989 should have been just like any other summer day. But it wasn't. When Kaitlyn dropped in late in the afternoon, Lois became unsettled. She begged Kaitlyn to stay in that night. She warned her stubborn daughter more than once that, quote, something bad is going to happen. But Kate dismissed her overprotective mother's pleas. She was headed to a friend's place in Old Town for a quiet dinner and maybe a movie. She said goodnight, asking that her mom not tell Dung about her plans should he call. Lois accused her of being mean. She and Dawn were very fond of her daughter's boyfriend. But she promised, and she tried to shake off the anxiety that continued even after Kate bounded out of the house with a cheery, "See you guys later." Those were her last words. Police discovered Kaitlyn's unconscious but alive in her car at 11 p.m. Officers had been called to the scene of what they were told was a routine car accident. According to Albuquerque police, Kaitlyn Arquette was the victim of a drive-by shooting on Lomas, near Broadway Northeast. The unknown shooter discharged 3 bullets into the car, 2 of which struck Kaitlyn in the head. The car veered out of control and collided with a telephone pole. Kaitlyn was rushed to the University of New Mexico hospital, and her family was notified, but they were only informed there had been an accident. Once they got to the hospital, though, they learned she was the victim of a random shooting. She was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Lois and Dawn notified their other children, who converged on the family home. Her boyfriend Dung joined Lois and Dawn in the hospital room. The following day became a blur of bedside vigil, beeping monitors, and prayer. Kate's older sister Robin was a singer and songwriter. Before she could get to the hospital, Lois played a cassette of Robin's songs in the hope that somehow her familiar voice could reach Kaitlyn in her coma. The songs played over and over throughout the day. Finally, when doctors advised that Kate would not recover from the massive damage to her brain, her parents honored her wishes and removed her from life support. In a strange twist of fate, Kaitlyn had made her wishes clear the year before when a family member suffered an accident that resulted in permanent brain damage. Lois was grateful she did not have to make that decision for Kate, who passed away July 17, 1989. The funeral for Kaitlyn Claire Arquette was held 4 days later. Most in attendance comforted Dung, but more than a few eyed him with suspicion. It wasn't unusual for a victim's boyfriend to be at the top of the suspect list. The investigation would ultimately reveal a great deal about Dung Nguyen, but that would come later. For on the night of Kaitlyn's funeral, he was stabbed in the abdomen and taken to the hospital. That wound was determined to be self-inflicted, a botched suicide attempt. He claimed he was deeply depressed over his girlfriend's death. However, rumors persisted that Dung had not stabbed himself. Strangely, Kate's friend Susan Smith, also reported in the media as Sharon Smith, missed the funeral because she, too, was in the hospital. She presented in the ER with a badly wounded arm, reported by her to be a bite from her dog. Interestingly, she was the friend in Old Town where Kaitlyn had spent her final evening and the last known person to see Kaitlyn Arquette alive. A few days after the funeral and recovering from his stab wound, Dung approached Lois for a favor. He had tried to return to the Alvarado Square apartment he shared with Kate, but was denied entry by the landlord. The locks had been changed. Lois, certain there must be a mistake, contacted her daughter's landlord. He assured her there was no mistake. He had changed the locks, and it wasn't the first time. That, he explained, was when Kaitlyn had asked to sleep on his family's sofa when Dung and his friends took over the apartment. The friends were rumored to be part of a Vietnamese gang, and Kaitlyn was afraid of them. They had broken in through a window to gain entry. The second time, following an argument, Dung kicked in the door. He was bad news, the man said, and since he was not on the lease, he was not welcome there. Lois was shocked. How could this be true? Dung in a gang? She refused to believe it. Then she spoke to Kate's girlfriends. She learned of car insurance scams perpetrated by Dung and his friends in California. They would stage auto accidents in rental cars and fraudulently collect insurance proceeds. When confronted, Kate's about-to-be booted beau denied the accusations about the schemes and challenged that Kaitlyn wanted him out. Police interviewed Doug's friends, including Ray Padilla. He said he met Kaitlyn about a year before her death and confirmed the details of the insurance fraud. He added that Kaitlyn did not use drugs, but Dung's California friends were cocaine dealers. Ultimately, after a brief investigation and alibi check, Dung was cleared as a suspect in the homicide. Then, 6 months later, police arrested 3 men for the crime. The arrest was the result of a Crime Stopper tip. The tipster, 16-year-old Robert Garcia, claimed he witnessed the shooting while joyriding with 3 friends. The following month, in February 1990, he recanted the story, stating that police had bullied him into fingering the suspects by threatening him with prison time. By April 1991, the last of the accused men was freed, with the district attorney dropping all charges. DA Bob Schwartz cited, quote, erosion in the state's case as the reason for his actions. In the years following Kate's murder, Lois pursued every avenue available in her quest to get justice for her daughter. She used a dogged investigative journalist, a private detective, and a passionate psychic in her search for the truth, but the case remained unsolved. Meantime, she continued to write books, but she could no longer work in the genres of mystery, suspense, and horror. It was too painful. She switched to writing for children. Like many of her earlier novels, her title, Hotel for Dogs, was also made into a popular film starring Emma Roberts. Lois ultimately penned 2 nonfiction books about Kaitlyn's case. The first, Who Killed My Daughter, was completed in 1992 and detailed Kaitlyn's brief life and the investigation into her death. The book explored the sinister underworld of an Asian crime ring and the rumored hit on the young woman about to blow the whistle. The second nonfiction book, titled One to the Wolves on the Trail of a Killer, delves even deeper into illicit drug dealings, police apathy and incompetence, and political corruption. It was published in 2013 and featured a foreword by true crime writer Ann Rule. The best-selling author credited Lois Duncan with helping her to forge her own writing career. She went on to fame and fortune with books like Small Sacrifices and The Stranger Beside Me, her debut offering about then-friend Ted Bundy, with whom she worked in a suicide crisis center. Years later, the 2 writers became friends. Sadly, neither author would experience the satisfaction of learning the shocking truth about Kaitlyn's murder. Ann Rule passed away in July 2015 following a heart attack and congestive heart failure. She was 83. In June 2016, Lois died following a series of strokes at the age of 82. Publisher Beverly Horowitz said, Lois Duncan was the ultimate professional writer. She influenced a generation not only of readers, but also of writers. Cut to Albuquerque, New Mexico, 2021. On July 20th, 2021, a man named Paul Raymond Apodaca, age 53, walked into an Albuquerque police station and confessed to possessing information about, quote, murders from a long time ago. Citing a searing hatred for women, Apodaca recalled seeing 21-year-old student Althea Oakley walking home from a frat party in 1988. She was cutting through a parking lot of what is now called Central New Mexico Community College. Apodaca was a security aide at the former TVI. He got into his car and followed Oakley, who smiled at him as he approached. He ambushed her from behind and stabbed her to death in the back, front, and side. Apodaca also confessed to killing 13-year-old Stella Gonzalez near Tingley Beach that same year. He saw the teen walking with a friend, and he killed her with a shot to her head. Finally, 32 years after the murder of Kaitlyn Arquette, the confessed serial killer ended decades of speculation when he claimed responsibility for the crime. He admitted he shot her in the head while she was driving her red Ford Tempo, which then veered into traffic and struck a pole. Witnesses on the scene described seeing a man in a gray Volkswagen Beetle. That car belonged to Paul Apodaca, then 21. He also confessed to a number of rapes. The investigation into the alleged serial killer and his confessions is ongoing. According to Albuquerque Police Department Chief Harold Medina, Apodaca has admitted to additional shootings and murders, including the homicide of 18-year-old Kaitlyn Arquette in 1989. While the Arquette family is grateful to finally have an answer, they are endlessly frustrated with the police. Carrie Arquette, Kaitlyn's older sister, shares the family's pain over the fact that Apodaca was on the scene of the homicide, standing with the police who did not question him. If they had, they would have discovered a juvenile record that listed multiple rape and assault charges. A DNA sample was finally linked to Apodaca in February 2021. It had been sitting in a backlog of more than 5,000 rape kits on an evidence shelf for years. At the time of his confession, he was wanted on a parole violation. According to APD Deputy Commander Kyle Harstock, they are trying to put all the pieces together before sharing additional information. Their goal is to gather sufficient evidence to charge Apodaca with Kaitlyn's murder. Kaitlyn Arquette was a headstrong young woman, wise beyond her young years. She was also an organ donor card carrier. Carrie Tyler of the Albuquerque Tribune reported that Kaitlyn's heart and lungs were donated to a Santa Fe patient who received a rare heart-lung transplant. Her liver was donated to a man in Los Angeles, and her kidneys went to a patient in San Francisco. Kaitlyn's sister Robin selected the epitaph for her grave marker, which Mark Twain had penned for his own daughter. Warm summer sun, shine kindly here. Warm southern wind, blow softly here. Green sod above, lie light, lie light. Good night, dear heart, good night, good night. Anyone with information about this case or another being investigated by the Albuquerque Police Department are urged to call 505-768-2416. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the update on this puzzling cold case. If you did and would enjoy more compelling stories, I ask that you click the like button and consider subscribing. My channel is new and it helps a lot. I upload 1 or 2 videos each week highlighting the fascinating details that emerge when the killer is caught. Until then, have a great rest of your day. Scary Clarey out.